Hello, how is everyone doing? We don't actually have time for you to answer. I want to maximize my use of the sunlight, so we'll loop right back to you and you can answer at the end if there's time. Today, I wanted to actually discuss a couple things. I think it's quite an intricate and complex issue and I don't really want to oversimplify it. To sum up the overall topics, I want to discuss imposter syndrome, the general effects it has on people, and more specifically how it deters people from opening up and being vulnerable to others. Also, I'm prefacing this right now, as I'm sure pretty much everyone knew, but still, I am no trained professional of any sort. I am but a person on the internet making a video essay, so keep that in mind. Another thing you may or may not have picked up by now is that this is actually a continuation from the video I made last year titled For People Who Don't Open Up to Others. If you haven't seen it, I'll link it below, but you probably have if you found my channel, because I think it's my most popular video. That was actually a really scary thing to post because, I don't really like to be vulnerable with the people in my personal life, let alone the entire internet. However, I did it anyway just in case there was someone out there who felt the same as I did, and lo and behold, a lot of people did. After like 9 months from me actually posting the video, there seemed to be a surge of views, and ever since then I've had at least 1 or 2 people daily DM me on Instagram opening up about their own life story, talking about their struggles, and just expressing how happy they were to have come across my video. This meant so much to me, and if you're one of those people who messaged or even just in general felt like that, even if you didn't reach out to me, it means so much. Like, thank you so much for reaching out and trusting me with your life story and being so lovely and supportive. Like, you're all just amazing, and thank you. Like, it really meant a lot to me. My point of all of this is I realized how many people were affected by this problem, not being able to open up to others, and I really started trying to think about the causes behind this. Obviously, there are several root causes. It's not going to be the same for everyone. It could be your upbringing. Maybe your emotional needs weren't met or were disregarded when you were a child, or you had to become a parental figure from very young, or you were responsible for the emotional needs of your parental figure, and this all just led to you keeping your emotions to yourself. I think a lot of the fucked up qualities we have as adults can be linked back to childhood in some way or another, honestly, but I'm definitely not going to deep dive into that absolute horror show today. After all this psychoanalysis, I reached the conclusion that not being vulnerable is actually just a symptom amongst many others of something else, at least for me, and that is imposter syndrome. Statistics show that at least 75% of the population experience imposter syndrome at least one time or another, so it's pretty common. If you haven't heard of this before, it's defined as an internal experience of believing that you're not as competent as others perceive you to be. While this definition is usually narrowly applied to intelligence and achievement, it has links to perfectionism and the social context. It's often spoken of by people in a professional capacity, people who feel like they're frauds within the work environment and just heavily question their achievements and their abilities. The term was actually first used by 2 psychologists, Suzanne Imes and Pauline Rose Clance, not sure how to pronounce that with my accent. And it was initially only applied to high-powered women who experienced self-doubt, but now it's more of a widely used term that can basically apply to just about anyone who expresses these traits. Some common characteristics include overachieving, sabotaging yourself, fearing you won't live up to expectations, attributing your success to external factors such as luck, and you also tend to hyperfixate on your mistakes and your flaws while simultaneously just undercutting your successes. It could actually stem from childhood experience, especially if your family valued high achievement. But it could also come from entering a new role, like starting a new job or going to university or college. There are actually a lot of different ways that imposter syndrome can appear, which I found really interesting, so I kind of want to share it with you. A lot of this information that I'm about to share is actually from a website called Very Well Mind, which I'll link below, so if you want to do more research on this, feel free. But basically, to sum up, these are the 5 main ways that imposter syndrome can present. First of all, there's perfectionist who is never satisfied and feels that their work could always be better. They focus mainly on their mistakes and tend to put high amounts of pressure on themselves, as well as experience copious amounts of anxiety. The superhero who pushes themselves to work as hard as possible because they feel inadequate. The expert who is always trying to learn and never feels satisfied with their level of knowledge on a topic. They tend to underrate their own expertise even if they're highly skilled. The natural genius sets very high and challenging goals for themselves and feels completely crushed crushed if they don't succeed in their first try. Finally, we have the soloist. They tend to be very individualistic and prefer to work alone. Their self-worth stems from their level of productivity, so they're very unlikely to reach out to others for assistance. They often view asking for help as weakness or incompetence. I felt quite called out by those descriptions. I'm curious as to whether anyone else identifies with these specific descriptions. They have imposter syndrome, so yeah, please do let me know. It's really interesting. Also, I do want to say, if you have anxiety, it doesn't naturally mean you have imposter syndrome or vice versa. I do think for some people, at least for me, these two things can overlap and fuel each other, but having one doesn't necessarily mean you have to have the other. I also relate to perfectionism playing a very big part in imposter syndrome, to the point where I feel like it's embarrassing for me to not be okay. It's almost like I failed some sort of life test. I have this need to be seen as this perfect, well put together person, and I don't really want to ruin that image for anyone. I've heard people describe it like this before, and I think it's very true. I think it's like I'm in a movie and everyone else seems to have these scripted lines, and I'm just trying to get through it without getting caught out and being called a fraud. But like, seriously, I really do feel like, and I'm sure a lot of people can relate to this, like everyone else knows the answer to life except me, to the point where I'll see someone doing something and I'll feel like I should be doing it, because if they're doing it, it must be right. Like, even if it's not something I want to be doing. I tend to put more trust in other people's realities than I do in mine. Does that make sense? My brain just went off on a tangent there, but that's the only way I know how to describe it. But I guess that's it, right? We're all trying to meet the standard of perfection we've set for ourselves in our heads, and that includes being fine and happy and funny all the time. We may even look up to certain people who emulate these qualities, and I mean, we don't see them breaking down and being vulnerable or opening up. Avoiding talking about my feelings can't solely be blamed on imposter syndrome. Like I said initially, the psyche is very complicated, and I'm not trying to oversimplify it by chalking this all down to one simple solution. There's the fear that I'll burden others if I rely on them or open up to them. I don't want to cause them worry, because really, I'm fine. In my previous video on this topic, I mentioned my fear around losing friends just because I open up, and that fear still hasn't gone away, even though it's never happened. That's never happened to me. I mean, now I'm dating and I'm worried about losing my boyfriend for the very same reason. And at times have convinced myself that I'm not telling him my problems because I'm protecting him from myself, which is so stupid. It just doesn't make sense. Obviously, he'd want to support me and be there for me. Isn't it crazy how much time we just spend worrying about things that don't even exist? It's wild to me. Like, imagine how much time I could have saved if I didn't waste so much time overthinking. I mean, I could have written that novel by now, because obviously that's what's holding me back, not my chronic procrastination, obviously. Like I said previously, protecting others from your more serious self doesn't allow for deeper connections, and I still stand by that. Paradoxically, by not opening up because of factors such as imposter syndrome, I feel like a fraud that doesn't deserve these people, and that they wouldn't want to be friends with me if they knew the truth. What this truth is, I don't actually know, because I'm not a terrible person, and I'm fairly certain I've never murdered anyone except within my dreams. So I'm as stumped as everyone else as to why I'm experiencing this recurring thought, but that's something I'm working on overcoming. By not opening up, this bottling up of emotions can lead to breakdowns or emotional dumping, which are both unhealthy and toxic ways of dealing with your emotions. This can obviously be nipped in the bud by trusting others to support you, obviously if they're in the mental space to be able to. In regards to dealing with imposter syndrome, I found a couple of things that have been helping me that will hopefully eventually lead to me not experiencing imposter syndrome at all. It's a process though. It is a process, I will say. First of all, stop comparing yourself to others. I'm serious. Stop. You're living such a different life with so many different factors and components that it's actually impossible to truly compare your progress or success to someone else's. I've also found that in talking to people that I'm comparing myself to, you find out that they're not these gods to worship and be envious of. They're just humans trying to figure out life with their own issues and their own stresses going on. The grass always seems greener on the other side, right? When you feel yourself heavily critiquing your abilities or yourself as a person and what you're doing, just think about it. Actively question your thoughts. Is that actually true? What is really making you say that? Would you feel the same way if this was someone else's work or someone else's life? And lastly, avoid self-sabotage. Once again, I know, easier said than done, especially as we only tend to realize after the fact that we've fucked ourselves over. But once again, actively questioning yourself and your motives can help. By being aware of your reasoning behind actions, you'll be able to push past wanting to tear yourself down and become that self-actualized, amazing human being you were always destined to be. For example, why are you actually putting off completing that work or submitting that essay or taking up that hobby? Is it because you're too tired or don't have time? You've been on your phone for the past 5 hours, I promise you have the time. Or is it because you think you'll perform badly and you want to do everything perfectly, so you don't even want to start because of that fear of failure? I know. Mind-blowing. I still struggle with imposter syndrome and I hyper-focus on my flaws probably more than is actually healthy. However, I'm working on changing and I hope you are too. As I've said before, we're too cool to not thrive in life. By watching this video, you're automatically cool, so don't even doubt me on that. I feel like this has gotten really long and convoluted, but I hope you enjoyed this video and could relate to it in some way or another. And like I said in my other opening up to others video, please feel free to message me if you don't have anyone in real life to talk to or open up to. You can literally just word dump and say you don't want to reply if you want to. Like, sometimes it's nice to just get something off your chest and put it out there into the void, knowing someone else has seen it without getting any advice or anything. Thank you for watching, and for the first time ever, I'm going to say, if you like my content and want to see more of it, feel free to subscribe. That felt strange, but I'm trying out something here. I've always been really scared of asking people to like and subscribe to my channel, which is kind of silly, but here you go. Say hi to your mom for me.